Hey, how's it going? In today's video, we're going to be talking about whether or not it is a good time to buy a house in 2025. I'm going to be going over for reasons why you should not be buying a house, and I'm also going to be going over for reasons why I think you should be buying a house at this current moment. So to begin with the elephant in the room, we're going to be talking about rates, because right now rates are one of the main reasons on why people are hesitating to buy. Because first of all, you're paying more in terms of interest and you can get a larger loan amount. Now, this is something that is very, very common when it comes to people thinking that it is a bad time to buy a house, because at first glance, it's pretty easy to understand. Higher interest rate means I'm spending more money, and also I'm not going to be able to qualify for as much of a house as I would like. So just to get it started, I already have two scenarios on how much house could you afford making $72,000 a year. Now, I am going to go ahead and say that I'm assuming that there are no additional debts in terms of this income. However, the case is still the same. So here I have a current interest rate of around 7.25% for a conventional loan, 3% down. And here we can see that we can get a house of around $300,000 in terms of a purchasing price. And the house payment is going to be just shy of $3,000 if we go ahead and include for taxes, insurance, and also the loan payment. Okay, what would happen if the interest rate was 2% lower back to around 2021, 2022? What would be the main difference there if the interest rate was 2% lower? Well, right off the bat, I mean, instead of qualifying for a house at $300,000 at a $72,000 income, you're going to be able to qualify for a house around $355,000. And with that same payment just shy of $3,000. And on top of that, you're going to be paying less in terms of interest, even the fact that the loan has been increased. Now, that is a very strong argument when it comes to not buying a house, because I mean, look, first of all, you're going to be spending more money in terms of interest, and you're not going to be able to buy as much in terms of house. However, if you just look at the interest rate, that doesn't paint the whole entire picture. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is home prices. A lot of people think that home prices are going to drastically fall and die somewhere. So here I have the median sales price of the houses sold in the United States. And the first thing that stands out to me is we more or less hit a peak back around 2022, Q4. So we're talking about around November, December time period. And the median sales price peaked around $440,000. If we go ahead and compare that to today, I mean, we've decreased quite substantially around, let's just say 25,000 over the course of 2-3 years. So, I mean, home prices have decreased. And on top of that, I have a little list here, and that's around a 5 to 6% decrease in terms of home value. Now, this is where things become very, very speculative, because look, we do have this home value that's been decreasing by 6% over the course of 2 years. However, I mean, who's to say what's going to happen to home values? Because, I mean, as we can see here, I mean, every, let's say like 10, 20 years, there's like a correction in terms of home values. And first of all, you're not really going to know how long that correction is. Take a look back at the 1990s. You see it dip down a little bit and it leveled off and it increased quite drastically. The same thing happened in 2008 during the housing recession. We hit a peak, decreased for a few years, and then we went back up. Home prices are going to go up and down regardless. There's not really much you can really do about it. If you want to go ahead and speculate, by all means, go ahead and do that. A lot of this you really can't tell in terms of what's going to happen to home prices. The one thing you can be pretty sure of is that, like, even if home prices do drop, they will recover at some point. And you can go down a huge rabbit hole in terms of, okay, when is the best time to buy a house? Well, if you're trying to buy a house and you're trying to find a good value, bang for your buck, whatever, okay, cool. That's great. However, first of all, I can guarantee you're not going to have enough experience to know whether or not a good house is a good house to buy to make money. And on top of that, you are also going to need to trust the realtor that you're working with in terms of being able to help you buy a house. Because you best believe that any realtor that you're going to be talking to, the likelihood is that they're going to go ahead and try to help you buy a house regardless of the market. At that point, like, you really, really need to have a basic understanding of, like, okay, what happens with the market? What happens with real estate? And how can I actually invest properly? Here's a basic idea that I just want to give to you. Scenario 1, when it comes to buying a house and making money or trying to get a good bang for your buck, I can guarantee you, there are some people in this world who did their best to make as much money as possible, but they still lost money buying right here. And on top of that, I can guarantee you also that there are people who bought houses right here and they still made money within this certain time frame. When it comes to buying a house, you are looking at the median sales price. There's a lot of money to be made when it comes to real estate because there's a lot of things you can't control, and there's ways to actually look at the house because you can't just take a flat out number at face value and believe that this is how much a house is worth and this is how much it's going to sell for, blah, blah, blah. When you look at this data or any statistical data, there is going to be a huge range in terms of home values. Here, what do we have here? We have around 258,000. Here is just a median, but the thing is, you're going to have a range of home values that are going to be bought and sold. I mean, just to tell you right off the bat, this is for the United States. Where I'm currently at, I'm in San Antonio. We're actually not around this $250,000 price range back in 2007, probably even under $200,000 price range. There's going to be a huge, and I mean huge range of home values, because there's a lot of things that go in terms of being able to look at the house, look at the value of the house. I mean, you can go on Zillow and see the huge discrepancy in terms of home values. A house in California is going to be around 2 to 3 million, where a house in Texas is probably going to be around 3 to 400,000. So you really can't use this as a decent gauge or frame of reference. Real estate is very, very local and market dependent on where you currently live. Let's just say we go ahead, cross this out. This is no longer the United States, and we put San Antonio. We are still going to have that same situation where we're going to have this entire spread when it comes to home values. Because look, if you have enough experience, I can guarantee you can buy at the top and you'll still be able to make money. Because, I mean, there's different houses, different scenarios, different things, different costs of renovations. There's a whole bunch of things that go involved to making money with buying a house or real estate. When you have people who are speculating that home prices are going to be falling whenever they buy a house, or they're waiting for home prices to fall before they buy a house, I can go ahead and guarantee you that that is not a very, very good reasoning behind buying a house and just waiting for home prices to drop. Because you know who else is waiting for home prices to drop? A whole bunch of other people. Just because in the short term we're in a correction phase doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to buy a house and make potentially money in the future. So those are the two main reasons why people aren't wanting to buy a house. They're waiting for home prices to drop, or they're too high, or they're also waiting for interest rates to drop. Another case against buying a house is renting just feels safer. I can just go ahead and rent out a place and I don't have responsibility for an entire house. And that is one case of not buying a house, is at that point you're not liable to buy a house. You don't have to worry about your credit score going down or maintaining the payments or fixing the house if something happens or breaks or whatever. Okay, I can understand that. I get that. So if you feel safe renting for a year, 6 months, 3 months, it doesn't matter. By all means, go ahead, do your thing. Those are the cases on why you shouldn't be buying in 2025. But now let's go ahead and talk about, like, what is the real risk of waiting in terms of buying a house. First of all, let's just go look at information that we can actually just see. So just to look at this, we already see that the median sales price of houses sold in the United States. So here we have 50 to 60 years of evidence in terms of how home prices have changed in the United States. The one thing that I can see about this graph is that it goes up. Just to give you a little bit more understanding, like by how much, this is around 5.5% if we use this data alone. 5.5%, what is that? So if you buy a house around $100,000, if you just own the house, theoretically, you'll be able to make around $5,500 for every $100,000. So if you own a house, $200,000, that's around $11,000. If you own a house that is $300,000, that is around $16,000. For every year you own a house, you can see a appreciation rate of around 5.5% on the home value. So if you have the intention of trying to buy a house and make a quick buck, I'm sorry, I would actually go and suggest for you to look somewhere else. However, if you're looking to buy a house and owning it for a prolonged period of time, this is by far one of the best ways for you to go ahead and make money. So that is one of the real risks in terms of waiting. Home prices are going to be increasing over a prolonged period of time. The only real thing that you risk losing in terms of is just basically paying more for the same house. Now, currently, what is the other risk in terms of waiting to buy a house? If we go back and look at our very, very first example in terms of why you shouldn't be buying a house right now, is you could probably argue in terms of interest rate. So let's just go ahead and start looking at interest rates. So here's that same chart, but it's for 30-year fixed rate mortgages. If you can see, back in 2020, home loan interest rates were ridiculously low. That's probably what caused this initial spike in terms of home value, is that everyone and their mom wanted to buy a house because interest rates were ridiculously low. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our current market. I mean, right now we are sitting around that 7% more or less in terms of interest rates. When was the last time we were at 7%? Well, we actually first hit 7% around 2022. The last time before 2022, when we hit 7%, we were probably sitting around that, let's argue, 2006 to 2008. So if you look in between that time slot of 2007 to 2022, right, you could probably argue within that 10-year span, like, we've seen ridiculously low home loan interest rates. Because look, before 2008, I mean, they were working with 7% on average. 7% was actually arguably really good back in the 1990s, right? Because at one point it went up to 8.5% interest rates. Here we can see a 9.2% interest rate in 1994. And then look, we're going to look at the highest back in the 1981. I mean, home interest rates were 18%, which is absolutely ridiculous. Because like, okay, let's go ahead and look at what happens when interest rates are at 18%. Well, previously at a $72,000 income at a 5.25% interest rate, you could probably get a house around $3,000 payments and have a purchasing price of $355,000. Well, let's just go ahead and see what happens when we just put 18% in terms of interest rate. So for that same house of $355,000, the payment's going to be $6,300, which is absolutely ridiculous, right? I can only imagine paying that much in terms of a house payment. So obviously we're not going to be going back to there, but it's just to give you some frame of reference in terms of like, look, interest rates right now, they're air quotes, they could be bad, but I mean, there's not nothing too far off from what we've seen historically, right? If you look within this time span, okay, cool. Yeah. Interest rates above a 7 is not normal. However, if you take a little bit of a larger look at this, you can see that right now 7% is more or less pretty standard, right? At least for the past 50 plus years. But in terms of the past 10 years, no, interest rates at a 7% is a lot higher than previously back in 2021 when we had a 3% interest rate. However, actually, I wouldn't want interest rates to go back down that low, because what happened the last time interest rates went back all the way down to 3%? Well, you saw home prices skyrocket. Imagine. So in 2020, home prices went from 317 all the way up to 337,000. That's like more than 33% in terms of a home value increase, which is absolutely ridiculous. So what's going to happen right now if we have a 7% interest rate and interest rates decrease? Like, you're going to see the same thing. Even with these high interest rates, home prices have been staying the same, arguably, right? They've only decreased by 6% over the past few years. I can only imagine that they'll probably increase quite considerably, because look, everyone and their mom, they're all waiting for interest rates to drop. The only thing that you really can do at this current point is you buy a home when it fits you best, right? Are you fine with the payments? Does it make sense financially? Do you have enough assets in the bank where you can afford doing a large down payment and also paying for closing costs, right? And what's like the demographics behind buying a house? I'm just trying to give you some insights or an out of the box perspective when it comes to buying a house. After me telling you everything and all this, what markets are we in? Are we in a buyer's market or a seller's market? I mean, what's the difference? What are the two things? So a buyer's market is basically a market where home buyers have the predominant leverage in terms of buying a house. Now, the seller's market is the flip side, where sellers have the leverage in terms of selling their house. Back in 2020, where interest rates are low and everyone and their mom was buying houses, it was actually a seller's market, because if you talk to people who experienced in 2020 that type of real estate market, houses were getting multiple offers and getting offered more than what they were asking for in terms of home value. Now, what's going on right now? I mean, you can see the data. Home prices have stayed the same for the past 2-3 years, arguably. Interest rates, we are at around 10-15 year high, right? Everyone is comparing the frame of reference from the past 10 years ago. So everyone's waiting in terms of either A, selling their house or buying their house. Right now, there are more buyers in the market, and they basically have the leverage in terms of being able to negotiate certain things in terms of buying a house. Now, why is that? First of all, interest rates are high and home prices have not changed in respects to what people would like them to be. I can tell you from experience, at least in San Antonio, that there are a lot of transactions where there have been houses on the market for a prolonged period of time and they're getting desperate. And when people get desperate in terms of selling their house, there's two things they do. They either A, offer you seller concessions to help you buy the house, or B, they reduce the sales price of the house. Let me go ahead and give you some examples. So here I have a house that is on the market for $250,000, and here it says 10 days on Zillow. So if we go ahead and we scroll down, we can look at the price history of this house. When was it first listed for sale? So here we see May of 2024. Right now, it's about to be July in 2025. So that is a year and give or take a month in terms of being on the market. So around 13 months ago, this house was first listed for, let's just say, $290,000. So you're telling me after a whole year, this house decided to decrease in value by $40,000. What happened here? So the first thing I could tell you is that this homeowner didn't put the correct for sale value of the house, because first of all, it hasn't even sold. They're desperate enough where they decided to take a $40,000 loss in terms of the home sale value. And you know what? Even by reducing the price by $40,000, someone still hasn't bought it, even at $250,000, because it is still for sale. And this is just one case. if we go ahead and we look, and the seller's offering to offer $2,500 in terms of seller concessions, which is okay, cool. So here's another house. House looks nice. This house is at around $221,000. If we go see here, it's been on Zillow for 50 days, but if we go ahead and scroll down and look at the actual receipts, this house has been listed for sale for the past 6 months, and the original price was $255,000. So here's another case and example where the home value got decreased by around $30,000+. So what does that mean? So first of all, homes aren't selling at this current point, and sellers are even offering help in terms of buying the house. So let's just go ahead and take a look at see if there's any seller concessions. Look, it says right here, homeowner will help with buyer closing costs. Perfect. So that basically means that not only are they going to be fine and willing to sacrifice $30,000 that they lost, they're also willing to help reduce their profits to help someone buy the house. And this is just 2 houses over a whole bunch of houses here in San Antonio. And I can guarantee you that's not the only house that has decreased in price. Because home prices have been decreasing arguably for the past 2 to 3 years and interest rates are high, we are actually in a buyer's market where you are more than likely going to be able to find a house and also ask for help in terms of the closing costs or getting the house. So that is what I think in terms of the current housing market. Is it a good time to buy? Well, it depends, right? The first thing you need to do is you need to compare and contrast the different options. If you were to go ahead and compare buying a house back in 2020, homes were being listed on the market and being sold right away and actually being bought over the asking price in terms of the for sale value. Right now, we see a lot of houses that have been on market for a prolonged period of time where they are decreasing the for sale value of the house, and on top of that, they are willing to help in terms of the closing costs. And I can almost guarantee you, like right now is arguably one of the best times to buy. Sure, you're going to be spending a little bit more money in terms of the interest rate, interest, or things like that. But I mean, you're getting actually arguably a lot more benefits because first of all, you're buying houses at a discount, and you are also being able to buy a house where the seller is willing to help pay for some of the closing costs in terms of buying a house. So at the end of the day, is it a good time to buy? I would argue yes, because there's a lot less competition in terms of buying a house. Therefore, if you're looking to buy a house, there's a lot more room for negotiation. Anyways, that is all for today's video. I hope I was able to give you a little bit more insight in terms of whether or not it is a good time to buy a house in 2025. Personally, I actually do think it is a good time to buy because first of all, you're getting a lot in terms of seller concessions and you're getting large discounts in terms of home prices. I would argue it's a better time to buy now if you were to go ahead and compare that back to 2020, where first of all, home prices drastically increased by 20-30%. Although interest rates were really low, at that point you kind of have to pick which poison do you want. Do you want low interest rates and high valued homes, or do you want high interest rates and low valued homes? I would actually argue if you look at the longer term picture, it's probably worth buying a house with a little bit higher interest rates, and in the future, if interest rates do drop, perfect, you can go ahead and do a refinance, and at least at that point you'll be able to buy a house at a decent discount. Even then, let's just say we find the complete bottom in terms of buying a house, I can guarantee you can still lose money. There's still a lot of things that you need to learn and understand when it comes to real estate and real estate investing. If you have any questions in terms of buying a house, you need a realtor, let me know. If you also need a loan officer and you need help getting a loan for a house, I'm a loan officer licensed here in Texas. Please like the video, subscribe, and yeah, that is all. Thank you very much and have a great day.